The storm and the stampede. The wind howled through the valley, carrying dust and dread with it. It was early autumn, but the skies churned like it was mid-January. The once quiet farming town of Willow Ridge sat nervously beneath the weight of something ancient stirring. For generations, the people here had worked the land, raised cattle, and passed down stories, most of them forgotten, laughed off as superstition. But 3 weeks ago, that all changed. It started with a rumble, not from the sky, but from the earth. The first farmer to report it was Old Man Heron, a widower whose ranch sat near the edge of the ravine. 3 wild devils, he said, shaking as he sat on the sheriff's porch. Eyes like fire. They came at sundown. Didn't want our crops. Just chaos. They ran straight through my herd and scattered everything. No one believed him until it happened again. Then again. And again. 3 Mustang horses, black as coal, silent as ghosts, started terrorizing the land. They didn't steal, didn't kill livestock, just trampled fences, broke wagons, ran circles around barns, and disappeared into the forest as if they were never there. People tried to catch them. No one succeeded. Bullets didn't scare them. Dogs wouldn't chase them. It was as if the horses were spirits. The townsfolk grew afraid. Church bells rang daily now. Children weren't allowed to play after sunset. Farmers began sleeping with rifles beside their beds. And then came the storm. On the night of the 7th attack, thunder cracked through the sky like the earth itself was splitting. The Mustangs came again, this time not in silence, but with a terrifying scream that echoed across the hills. Trees bent, animals panicked, and every door in the village rattled on its hinges. That was when Emily, a quiet little girl no older than 9, saw them up close. She wasn't supposed to be out. Her grandmother had told her to stay hidden while the men patrolled the edge of their property. But something had called her out into the night, a whisper in her dreams, a sound only she could hear. It wasn't the storm, and it wasn't fear. It was a song, soft, melancholy, like the wind humming through hollow reeds. She stepped barefoot onto the wet grass, her eyes wide, and there they were, 3 massive stallions, manes wild, eyes glowing, not red, not white, silver. They stood still, not 20 feet from her. The ground was trembling beneath their hooves. But they didn't move, just stared. The middle one stepped forward slightly, and Emily felt something rise in her chest. Not fear, recognition. She took a step closer. From the porch, her grandmother screamed. The Mustangs reared, but not in rage. It was more like celebration, a thunderous cry of relief. Then they turned and galloped toward the woods. Emily turned back toward the house. Her grandmother had fainted. The next morning, the town buzzed with confusion and fear. The mayor called an emergency meeting. The sheriff said he was bringing in hunters from out of town. These are no regular horses, he said. But they bleed, I'm sure of it. We'll take care of this. Emily sat quietly outside, swinging her legs, eating an apple. She knew something had changed. She could feel it. That night, she had a dream. A golden valley, surrounded by waterfalls. The 3 horses were there again, but they were no longer wild. They stood beside a woman in a flowing green robe, her hair braided with wildflowers. She bent down to Emily and whispered, "You're the key. Only you." Emily woke up with a start. Her hand was glowing faintly in the moonlight. The mark of a hoof, burning like silver fire, faded slowly on her palm. The girl with the silver mark. For days after the storm, Emily felt something strange stirring inside her. Her senses were sharper, her dreams deeper. She could hear whispers in the wind, feel the heartbeat of the earth beneath her feet. But most of all, she could sense them, the Mustangs. She didn't tell her grandmother about the glowing hoof mark. She knew she wouldn't understand. No one in Willow Ridge would. They were scared, angry, and blaming the horses for every broken fence, every spooked cow, every bad crop. Emily knew better. They weren't attacking. They were trying to say something. At the town hall meeting, the mayor slammed a dusty book onto the table. According to legend, he began, "These horses are cursed spirits, protectors turned rogue after being betrayed by a farmer over 100 years ago. They guard the forest now, and if you cross them, They strike back, finished the sheriff grimly. It's time we put them down. A murmur spread across the room. Some nodded, some looked unsure, but no one stood up for Mustangs. Except one, a voice from the back, small but steady. They're not evil. They're hurt. All eyes turned. Emily stood there barefoot and brave. Everyone laughed nervously. Her grandmother rushed to pull her back. But Emily's eyes were glowing with something they couldn't understand. Conviction. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She slipped out again. The wind greeted her like an old friend, brushing her hair back as if guiding her. She followed it past the old mills, across the broken fence, and into the woods. The moonlight dappled the forest floor. And then, there they were, the 3 Mustangs. They stood in a clearing, motionless, waiting. The biggest one stepped forward. He bowed his head, and Emily saw it clearly now. The faint outline of an old collar mark around his neck, long gone but never forgotten. They had been owned once, tamed, and betrayed. As Emily reached out her hand, the forest pulsed with light. A circle of glowing symbols emerged on the ground beneath her feet. Ancient markings, swirling with gold and blue. The Mustangs didn't flinch. They circled her, gently, like a ritual. Then, suddenly, she understood everything. Memories that weren't hers flooded in. A little girl long ago, just like her, who lived on this very land. She had loved the Mustangs, protected them. She was the reason they had once trusted humans. And she was the one who died when the townspeople turned on the herd. Emily collapsed to her knees, breathless. The largest Mustang nudged her gently. "I'm her," Emily whispered. "I'm her again." The Mustangs reared gently, their eyes no longer wild, but filled with recognition. They had waited all this time, waited for her return. But danger loomed. Back in town, the sheriff and his men had tracked the hoofprints to the edge of the woods. They saw the glowing lights from afar. They loaded their rifles. "We move at dawn," he said. But one man hesitated. An old stable hand named Marcus, who had once seen the Mustangs before all this began. He looked toward the forest and whispered to no one, "That girl, she might be our only hope." The hidden valley and the bond beyond time. The night air shimmered with magic as Emily stood surrounded by the 3 majestic Mustangs. Each one now circled her slowly, their hooves silent against the glowing earth. It felt less like danger and more like destiny. The mark on her palm pulsed with warmth, glowing brighter whenever they came near. Suddenly, the largest horse, the one she'd started calling Ashmain because of the silver streaks in his mane, stepped forward. He knelt, not just a bow, a gesture of trust. Emily, trembling, climbed onto his back. Without a signal, the 3 horses bolted into the woods, not in chaos, but in harmony. Trees blurred past them, moonlight dancing across their backs. They ran until the trees thinned, the earth dipped, and the air changed. And then the valley opened before them. It was hidden, sacred, alive, a massive clearing surrounded by cliffs and waterfalls. Ancient carvings were etched into the stones, and flowers she'd never seen before swayed to music only the wind could hear. The Mustangs slowed to a trot, and Emily could feel the power in this place. This was their sanctuary. She dismounted and walked slowly through the field. Memories, not hers, yet deeply familiar, returned. The other girl, her previous self. She used to laugh here, run barefoot through these meadows with the very same horses, back when they were just foals. A spirit appeared, translucent, glowing. The girl from Emily's dreams. She spoke without speaking. "You came back. You never abandoned them. But others did. The Mustangs were never evil. They were guardians, sworn to protect the balance of Willow Ridge. But when the townsfolk took their land, broke their pact, and hunted them, the bond shattered. They were trying to protect what little magic remained." The spirit whispered. Emily's chest tightened. "And now they're being hunted," she said aloud. The spirit nodded. "You can restore the bond, but it will cost something." Back in the village, dawn crept over the rooftops like a warning. The sheriff and his men prepared their weapons. The hunters loaded their traps. Marcus, the stable hand, watched with unease. He had once seen a wild horse stand over a dying farmer, refusing to leave his side. That image never left him. He pulled the sheriff aside. "We shouldn't do this," he warned. But the sheriff growled, "They're wild. Dangerous. We can't wait for another attack." And with that, the men rode out toward the forest. In the valley, the Mustangs grew restless. They knew the humans were coming. Emily placed her hand on Ashmane's forehead. "I'll stop them. I swear." The spirit handed her a carved stone, glowing with runes. "This is a seal of the first bond. If placed at the heart of the valley, it will restore the ancient pact. But only one of blood and heart can do it." Emily didn't hesitate. She took the stone and looked at the path ahead. It led to the same trail the hunters were now marching down. She had little time. As she rode Ashmane through the trees, her eyes burned with determination. The mark on her hand now glowed like fire. She was no longer just a girl. She was the bridge, the stand between two worlds. The sun had barely risen, yet the trees were already whispering of war. Emily clutched the glowing seal of the first bond close to her chest as Ashmane thundered beneath her. Every hoofbeat echoed with urgency. Behind her, the two other Mustangs ran like shadows, silent and determined. Ahead, she could hear the sharp metallic clinks of rifles, the low murmur of men preparing for a fight they didn't understand. She had to reach them before it was too late. In a clearing just outside the valley, the hunters had set up an ambush. The sheriff barked orders. "We aim to scare 'em. If that don't work, we shoot. Clean and fast." Marcus stood at the edge of the camp, heart heavy. His instincts screamed at him. This wasn't right. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, a gust of wind rushed through the trees. Then hoofbeats. Fast. Furious. Then silence. Then Emily emerged from the tree lean, standing atop Ashmane, the seal clutched in one hand, wind sweeping her hair like wings. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice echoing across the woods. The men froze. No one expected a little girl, especially not one glowing with light. The sheriff raised his rifle. "Move aside, girl. These beasts are cursed." Emily's voice cracked like thunder. "They're not cursed. They're protectors. And I'm here to restore what you broke." The ground began to hum, a low vibration rising from the earth. The two other Mustangs stepped into the clearing beside Ashmane. Their eyes glowed not with rage, but sorrow. "They remember everything," Emily said softly. "How your ancestors broke their word. How you took what was never yours. But they still waited for peace." The sheriff laughed bitterly. "They trampled our fields, threatened our people." "No," Emily replied, stepping down. "They warned you, over and over, but no one listened." She lifted the seal. It blazed with white gold fire. The earth trembled. Trees bent toward the light. And then, from the very ground below, roots shot up, curling toward the sky and forming a circle of energy. The air filled with music, the same soft song Emily had heard in her dreams. Then, something even more impossible happened. The old spirit appeared. She hovered in the light, her hands extended. "The bond could be restored," she said, "but it must be accepted by both sides." Emily turned to the sheriff. "You want peace? Prove it. Lower your weapon." The men stood frozen. Silence hung like a blade. Marcus stepped forward and dropped his rifle. Then one by one, others followed. But the sheriff didn't move. The wind howled. Ashmane stepped between Emily and the sheriff, eyes blazing with ancient power. And in that moment, the sheriff hesitated. His hands trembled. Then the rifle fell from his grasp. The valley lit up with blinding brilliance. The seal pulsed and then melted into the earth like gold fire. The circle of energy expanded, wrapping around everyone in the clearing, human and horse alike. The Mustangs reared, not in anger, but in release. Centuries of pain lifted. When the light faded, the spirit was gone. But Emily felt her presence inside her now. In her breath, in her blood, the bond was restored. The Mustangs trotted calmly to the edge of the clearing and turned to Emily one last time. Ashmane stepped close, pressing his forehead to hers. Then, without a sound, they vanished into forest, the legacy she chose to carry. Weeks had passed since the valley lit up with ancient magic. Since the Mustangs vanished into forest shadows, no longer feared, but finally free. Willow Ridge had changed. The air felt lighter, the trees greener, the birdsong sweeter. And though no one had seen the horses again, their spirit was everywhere. In the wind, the rustle of leaves, the calmness of dawn. But the biggest change was within Emily. Every morning, she woke before sunrise and walked to the edge of the forest, not to find the Mustangs, but to listen. Sometimes, the breeze would brush her hair just right, like a nudge from an old friend. Sometimes, she'd hear distant hoofbeats, echoing like a memory. And sometimes, the ground would hum, softly, just beneath her bare feet. The bond had not just been restored. It had been reborn inside her. People in the town, once full of fear and suspicion, now came to her. Tell us about the spirit. Can you teach us to listen to the land again? And Emily, shy but brave, began to share. She led groups of children into the meadows, telling stories not from books, but from her own heart. She taught them how to sit in silence and understand the rhythm of the forest. Marcus, the old stable hand, helped to restore the abandoned sanctuary at the edge of the valley, turning it into a haven for injured animals and a place of learning for curious souls. One day, while planting wildflowers near the cliff, Emily uncovered something strange. A box, sealed and aged with time. Inside, wrapped in velvet, lay an old journal, the journal of the girl who came before her, the girl whose spirit had awakened a bond. Its pages were filled with stories, sketches of the Mustangs, and secrets about the valley's old magic. At the end, a single sentence stood out. If you're reading this, then you are the next guardian. Protect them, love them, lead them. Emily pressed the journal to her chest, tears stinging her eyes. She wasn't just a child anymore. She was a guardian. The farmhouse that once stood empty and crumbling was now alive with purpose. Vines were cleared, walls repainted. Inside, the rooms echoed with laughter, learning, and stories. Stories of magic, wild horses, and a brave girl who changed everything. Her grandmother, once skeptical, now sat on the porch every evening, knitting and smiling as children ran across the yard, chasing shadows and dreams. And as the sun set one evening, casting gold across the hills, Emily stood at the edge of the valley once more. She closed her eyes. The wind shifted, and from far off came a soft, familiar sound. A neigh. She smiled. They were watching. Always. The map beneath the floorboards. It had been 3 months since the valley glowed with light, since the Mustangs had disappeared into legend again. Emily was now known in Willow Ridge not as the strange girl, but as the listener. Elders came to her with stories. Children came to her with dreams, and animals came to her with trust. But one stormy night, as rain tapped against the windows of the restored farmhouse, something unexpected happened. A loud crack echoed through the house. A floorboard in the library had split open from age. Curious, Emily lifted the warped wood. Beneath it, she found a hidden compartment. Inside, an old, crumbling scroll, wrapped in wax cloth, sealed with the mark of a silver Mustang. Unrolling it with trembling hands, Emily discovered an ancient map. It wasn't just of the valley. It was of the entire region, stretching beyond the hills and forests into lands Emily had never imagined. Along the edges were strange markings, more seals like the one she had placed, but with different symbols, an eagle, a wolf, a bear, and a serpent, and at the bottom, scrawled in fading ink. The valley was only the beginning, for more bonds remain. One final guardian must awaken them all, or all will fade. Emily's heart raced. This wasn't just about the Mustangs. There were other guardians, other lands, other spirits in danger. The next morning, Emily called Marcus and her grandmother. She showed them the map. There are others out there, like me, and they may not know who they are yet. Marcus studied the scroll. These aren't just animals, he whispered. These are symbols of ancient guardianship. Legends speak of a time when the natural world was balanced by 5 forces: Mustang, eagle, wolf, bear, and serpent. Her grandmother, once skeptical, looked at Emily with awe. "You've been chosen for more than this land, child." And so Emily made a choice, not to stay, but to journey. She packed lightly, the journal, the scroll, a pouch of herbs, and a carved wooden charm Ashmain had left behind. Before she left, she planted a tree in the valley, a silver-leafed oak, with a plaque that read, "Where the bond was reborn." Then, one misty dawn, with the wind behind her and fire in her spirit, Emily took her first steps toward the unknown. She didn't know what dangers lay ahead, but she knew one thing. She would find the others. She would awaken the bonds. She would protect what was sacred.